Former North Korea spy chief Kim Yong Chol is in New York for meetings with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Chol is one of the most trusted aides of North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un. Secretary Pompeo and Chol have met twice before. Ahead of their meeting, Secretary Pompeo tweeted that he was looking forward to meeting with Chol and hoped to discuss the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong Un. The White House says it still expects the negotiations to happen on June 12th. Joining me now is the moderator of Face the Nation and CBS News senior foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan. All right, so Margaret, welcome. A lot going on here. What can we expect, first of all, with this meeting between Secretary Pompeo and Chol?
Well, this is extraordinary to see Kim Yong Chol even on U.S. soil, considering that the U.S. government basically banned him because he's under such sanctions. The reason he's being welcomed here and given the reception he is because it's sort of the reciprocal of what Secretary of State Pompeo got when he went to Pyongyang, with the big difference he's not getting to meet with President Trump, like Pompeo got to meet with Kim Jong Un. This is basically to test whether it's worth the president's time to go to that summit in Singapore next month. And the diplomats here are moving full speed ahead to try to salvage the stalled diplomacy. This is only one of 3 parallel meetings. You've got this summit at the highest level here in New York with the 2 national security advisors. And then you have in Singapore, White House officials meeting with North Koreans to work on the logistics, the nuts and bolts of what this would look like when the leaders come face to face. And then between North and South Korea at the demilitarized zone, you have very experienced diplomats who are sitting down to talk about what may actually be possible. But here in New York is where the decisions will be made.
And what is the significance of having this happen in New York as opposed to Washington, D.C.?
Well, this is an interesting choice, and we haven't really gotten a clear answer from the administration on why New York. Typically, this is a hub that is sort of outside the diplomatic norm because of the United Nations. So America can welcome leaders here to New York that they would not welcome in other parts of this country, where they'd actually be sanctioned and banned. And North Koreans actually can't travel any farther than Manhattan. They can't go to Washington, D.C. without a special permission. So this seems to be a way to avoid having that question of whether the leadership would have to be involved. Like I said, there's no promise of a meeting with President Trump like Secretary Pompeo got from Kim Jong Un when he went to Pyongyang. So this allows them a little bit of a diplomatic out.
So what about the actual summit itself? Where do things stand now? White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders seemed to express optimism regarding that. But what's the reality right now? Do we know?
This is one of those back and forth things, and the national security team is divided. They kind of are testing the waters to see, is the summit worth the president's time? What can we actually agree on? All these things that typically would have been worked out over an extended period of time behind the scenes without public scrutiny, but instead this is on fast forward because it's happening at such a high level. And right now we aren't necessarily talking, while you hear from the White House saying we want things like the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula,
right.
That's not where they are at this point. They're trying to figure out photo ops. They're trying to figure out the shape of the table.
Like logistics.
Logistics. Right. But for Secretary Pompeo and Kim Jong Chol, he can speak in terms like, well, maybe not give up nukes, but maybe let in weapons inspectors. Some significant first steps, things that would be substantial gives, so to speak, by North Korea that would say they are serious this time in a way they haven't been in the past when they've come to diplomatic agreements with other American presidents and then broken them.
So then how is this likely to work? Because given that this is not a traditional presidency here, is in the past you've got these folks who lay the groundwork and then they make their recommendation and then the president makes his decision, typically following the advice of those advisors. In this particular case, though, could you conceivably have a group of advisors counseling the president one way and perhaps not being altogether confident about what the results of a meeting might be, and the president discounting their advice and saying, you know what, actually, but if I get him in a room, perhaps that one-on-one interaction could be enough to convince Kim Jong Un.
And that's the big test here, because the president really personally believes in his own persuasive powers, right? He bills himself as this great negotiator. We really haven't seen seen him deliver on any great diplomatic deals or even congressional deals up to this point, the exception being that tax package that they got through Congress. So this is a huge test of what is actually possible diplomatically. But I will say within the president's own national security team, you're hearing different things from the Secretary of State versus the National Security Advisor, John Bolton. Remember, they kind of boxed themselves in, got themselves into a sticky spot with John Bolton referencing this quote-unquote Libya model, something that the president came out and said, no, that's not what I'm talking about here. So in some ways, you're seeing some of the messy edges here of what the administration is trying to piece together in terms of strategy. And it's not clear yet what that is. I've spoken to John Bolton in the past on Face the Nation, and he sketched out very broad terms saying this is not just about nukes, this is also about chemical weapons. It's about what North Korea does to sell weapons to countries like Syria. And then you hear from Secretary Pompeo, and he's very focused on just the nuclear portion here. So it's going to be an interesting test, because the bar that the president set for himself is he's got to do better than President Obama did with the Iran deal.
I will all be watching so closely. Margaret Brennan, great to have you here in person. Thanks so much, Margaret.
Good to be with you.